Morning, brothers and sisters. Naomi back for another video. I thought today's video would just be me supposing some things to try to figure out these wraths that I mentioned in one of my videos. Because we have one that comes from God, the wrath of God, and then we have one that comes from the devil, all right? So we had read in Revelation 6 on the end here, and I had said the wrath of God was the last 3.5 years, but now I'm wondering if that's right, okay? But let's look at Revelation 6 here. We're just going to look at a few things and try to figure out a few things as we go. We're just supposing, we're not saying they're so. Might give you cause to think about a few things in passages that you know of that you can factor in. So verse 17 of Revelation 6, it says this: for the great day of God's wrath, it says his, it's not his, it's hers. Her wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? So it's talking about the wrath of God, right? So verse 16, and said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us, and hide us from the face of her that sitteth on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. So it's her wrath. She's daughter Zion that sits to Christ's right hand. We've talked about this in Psalm 110. We know it's daughter Zion's wrath. She was rejected as the righteous spirit out of her rightful place in the heart of man. He chose a covenant with the whore spirit. Okay, this has been our premise, our supposition that we've been working towards, or trying to show you, and how Galatians 4:24 verifies that women do represent the two covenants, as in your spirit. One that puts you under bondage, Hagar, will put you under bondage, under law. That's the whore spirit that Adam chose covenant with. And then the righteous spirit, which was represented by Sarah, which represents the spirit from above. All right, now Christ come for that righteous spirit to put her back in her rightful place, to show mankind where she belongs. All right, so there we're talking about the wrath of God, of the one that sits on the throne. They got he all over the place. But it's her wrath for being rejected. And then for the great day of her wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? Well, we're told who will be able to stand, because in the next chapter, in chapter 7, it's the sealing of the 144,000 daughters of Zion. That's what I believe it to be. Now, you have the devil's wrath in Revelations 12, verse 12, after the daughters of Zion, it says, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit do I do these things. They rise up as the principle of Christ. There's one who is his bride, his spirit. And at the 3.5 year mark, you see Lucifer cast to the earth, and this is what it says. It says, therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. So it sounds like all those who are to be in the heavens are there at that time. Just keep listening to the verse. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabiters of earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because she knoweth, Adam knoweth, fallen Adam knoweth, and Lucifer knoweth, that whore spirit knoweth, that they have but a short time. They have the last 3.5 years. What it looks like is what I supposed it to be, okay? And you don't have to agree. We're just studying this to try to figure it out, which is what we're to do to hasten on the day of the Lord. That's what we're told in, I believe it was the book of James. I think it is James. Let's look at that. But it says that we are to hasten on the day of the Lord. And that word hasten has the idea of study. Well, if we have something wrong in our theology, the only way we're going to correct it is by studying to hasten on and to bring on the day of the Lord. That's what we're instructed to do. Where was that in James? I should have circled it. But it's in the book of James. Even if I don't find it, we did a study on it. But that we are indeed to hasten it on. We look forward to it, and we hasten it on. It's funny I didn't circle it. I've been lazy lately, I guess. And so that the idea is that if we have something wrong in our theology, we must correct it through our studies. And it doesn't mean reading the verses, because the only way you're going to get the full understanding of those verses is to actually go in and study each word and to use the spirit of discernment. And the Lord's going to provide that for you based on how earnestly you want to contend in the spirit with your enemy. That's how I look at it. So here we're looking at two wraths, one from God and one from the devil. And so I suppose that possibly the first 3.5 years is God's wrath. And it says judgment begins at the house of God. So that first in 3.5 years, called the tribulation period, is God judging the house of God, those saints that belong to God. Now that means that God must appoint those that's going to do that. And that's at 144,000 daughters of Zion that must birth the body. All right? And then we get that understanding on a deeper level of how the spirit that comes out of the body is actually going to reshape it, recreate it. Because we get that understanding from Romans 11 and from Romans, I think it was 9 or 10, and we already looked at this in the last video, how it is the first fruits that's going to make that body holy, and she reshapes it through the truth. And that is how we hasten the day of the Lord. That's how we do it, through studying, which then we begin to understand the truth that the body needs to understand, that comes down as a judgment on the house of God, from God, because that's what these daughters are considered. They're considered God. They're a divine selection. And we looked at that word in Greek, 1096, and it means to come into being. They become. They happen. The Spirit actually comes upon these 144,000 daughters of Zion. They are a divine selection. They were known before the foundations of the world, and they literally manifest in this very creation in a physical way. So this word means properly to emerge, become, transitioning from one point, realm, condition to another. Fundamentally means become, becoming, became. So it is not an exact equivalent to the ordinary equative verb to be, is, was, will be. Now the latter part of this says, means to come into being, a manifestation implying motion, movement, or growth. Thus it is used for God's actions as emerging from eternity and becoming, showing themselves in time, physical space. Now we find that a very difficult one to comprehend, doesn't it? Don't we? That God's actions, that these actual daughters of Zion, which is the glory of God, is actually going to manifest in the physical on this earth. That's what's so difficult for us to understand. And yet we have the allusion to it strongly in Revelations 7, when God's wrath comes upon this earth, and it says judgment begins at the house of God. And so we have the allusion to the harvest, and it seems to come in phases, this harvest. And then it says, who shall be able to stand, right? For the great day of the wrath of God is come, and who shall be able to stand? And then you have the sealing of the 144,000. Well, they're going to stand, because they are God's representation, these daughters of Zion, manifested in physical time and space, to perform the actions of God. Now, what I come to realize, now, like again, I'm just supposing here, that the first 3.5 years is actually the judgment on the body, all right? Which is alluded to as the birthing of the body by the Spirit, all right? That is actually reshaping the lump, all right? Which we had that allusion to in Romans again. For those who may not be following me. But what did it say in 11? It says, For if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world. Now that was the daughters of Zion in the very beginning, what man did to those daughters, or to the righteous spirit, which is what they represent. When the first Adam rejected a covenant with that righteous spirit, which was represented by the daughters of Zion, and cast them off, right? And then mother promises her daughters, her spirit's representation here on earth, that she will enlarge their birthright. And she does indeed do that. And she does that in Isaiah 49. She shows you how she goes about doing that. Which is considered these daughters' birthright. A birthright belongs to daughters that never belonged to sons. Though they tried to transition it to the male. It's not going to hold water in the end of days. But it says, for if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, what shall the receiving of them be but life from the dead, right? So the receiving of them be actually is her rebirthing the body through the words of truth, all right? And not through the words of Baal, which is your husband as your Lord and your master. Christ was never come to back up that image. He came to put the righteous spirit back in her rightful place. And then it says in verse 16, for if the first fruits be holy, the lump, the body, is also holy, and if the root be holy, so are the branches. So where she came from was the roots. She was the beginning. She was the foundation of this world. Now, in Romans 9, we alluded to the fact how it is. The spirit that has power over the clay. Verse 20 of 9, Romans 9, verse 20. Nay, but, O man, who art thou that repliest against God? Shall the thing formed say to her that formed it, why hast thou made me thus? Verse 21. Have not the potter power over the clay, the spirit, of the same lump to make one vessel unto honor and another unto dishonor? And then we have, for if the first fruits be holy, the lump is also holy, and if the root be holy, so are the branches. Now, so it looks like the first 3.5 years is the actual manifestation of Christ's glory on earth, represented as the daughter of Zion, this 144,000 that will receive this sealing. And I tend to think it has to do with your theology as taught to you by the Spirit, not by fallen man's theology, not by fallen Adam's theology, not by the whore spirit's theology, but by the Spirit's truth. You're taught that. And they are actually imbued with some kind of power to be able to do this. Now, I don't understand all of that, but I know that there is power, great power in the Spirit, and that the Spirit will manifest physically in these daughters, all right? And that these daughters are appointed to bring in the harvest. That means to birth the body for the first 3.5 years, which is a judgment on the house of God. This is how this is done. And then at the 3.5 year mark, after they've done their job, all right, Lucifer saw being kicked out of the second heaven because she's done what she was appointed to do. And Lucifer gets kicked out, and then you hear of the 3.5 years of her wrath, his wrath, all right? And that's the fulfillment of the covenant in I googled it and now I can't remember where it was that fast. It's in Isaiah. Let me look here. Let's see, it was Isaiah. I might have to Google it again. Maybe it was 28. Yeah, let's go to 28. But the last 3.5 years, which we see in Revelations 12 as the wrath of the devil who has come down to the inhabitants of earth, great is the wrath, it says, therefore rejoice, ye heavens, all right, and ye that dwell in them, woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because she knoweth that she hath but a short time. So this is the fulfilling of the passage that we find in, I believe it's Isaiah 28. Right. It's Isaiah 28, verse 15. Because ye have said, let's start at 14. Wherefore hear the word of the Lord, ye scornful men that rule this people which is in Jerusalem. Now we talked about the headquarters of Babylon actually being Jerusalem, because that's where the Holy Spirit has to reside in order to be in control of the body. And so these daughters of Zion actually birth the body through truth, and by doing that they become exalted in the body of man. And so they rise up into the second heaven, actually is what it kind of looks like. It's the 3.5 year mark, and kick Lucifer, though they're saw doing it in the spiritual way, because not by might nor by power, but by my spirit do I do these things. Because ye have said, we have made a covenant with death, this is verse 15, and with hell are we at agreement. When the overflowing scourge shall pass through, it shall not come unto us. For we have made lies our refuge, and under falsehood have we hid ourselves. And it's funny, because following that, in verse 16, we get the reference to the stone of Zion. Therefore, thus saith the Lord God, behold, I lay in Zion for a foundation stone, a stone tried, a tried stone, a precious cornerstone, a sure foundation, and he that believeth and she that believeth shall not make haste. You shall not be afraid. So you see what we're kind of looking at now. And based on that understanding, that premise, all right, that possibly, all right, we're just speculating and seeing if we can grow on this idea, all right, on this understanding of exactly the wrath of God and the wrath of the devil and what we're actually looking at. So possibly the first 3.5 years is the wrath of God. The 144,000 daughters of Zion, representing the spirit of the body, is appointed. They manifest in the physical world after they're sealed. In Revelation 7, it says, who can stand? Who can abide the wrath of God? Well, the 144,000 that are sealed can, and they go forth in the harvest of the body of Christ. The first 3.5 years, they birth it. It's appointed unto the daughter of Zion to birth the truth in the earth, and your correlation to that is actually the birthing of the body through the words of truth as the Spirit of Christ manifested in this earth for the first 3.5 years is what it looks like. And then the last 3.5 years is the wrath of the devil who has come down, and the fulfillment and the final death of fallen Adam and that poor spirit being judged. Right? And so it looks like by the 3.5 year mark, those that are appointed unto the heavens are there. That's what it looks like. And it's funny, because at the 3.5 year mark, and I always said this was the 3.5 year mark, it says, and I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on Mount Zion, and with him, her, 144,000, having not the father's name, it's the mother's name. And I believe that name is Truth, Emmett. And it's doctrine. It's the word of heaven, the laws of heaven. Having mother's name written in their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven, and the voice of many waters, and as the voice of a great thunder, and I heard the voice of harpers harping with their harps. And they sung as it were a new song before the throne. This is new creation coming into existence. This is how new creation comes into being, by the fire of the new principles, and that's your daughter of Zion, and the fire is the law of heaven, and they have a song only they can sing. All right, these were the ones that were rejected. It says they were not defiled by women. You're right, they were not defiled by that Holy Spirit's teachings, and it's not men. These are women. You have two seeds in opposition. You have the Holy Spirit and you have the righteous spirit. And that's represented by two women in Galatians 4:24, two covenants. It's not a man against a woman. It's not men are more pure than women. It's these women that must stand up. They have to take a stand for the truth. And they are shown, sorry, my hair is a mess. They're shown doing that in chapter 7. They're sealed. They've come into existence. They've actually manifested the truth of the Spirit. And the Spirit is empowering them to go forth in this harvest. Now, that's what my supposition is on this right now. Okay? And so I was looking at, and I have it pulled up here, Romans 13 is the latest chapter that I've been actually looking at. And I don't look at it just by reading it. All right? I've been going in and looking at what the words actually say. And it's absolutely referring to the daughters of Zion. Absolutely. They will never give the name daughter Zion anywhere in the New Testament. But that's absolutely the authority of God, the government of God. Romans 13:1. Every person is to be in subjection to the governing authorities, the higher powers. That there is a feminine. And it's a feminine because it's representing the Spirit. It's representing the daughters of Zion, who represents the Spirit of the body, who is your government. Because what does the Old Testament say? And we proved how the key of David is referencing the righteous daughters of Zion, whereas the key of Solomon was referencing the whore spirit that Solomon put in charge of Zion, the body. All right? And in effect, ends up exalting that whore spirit into the midst of the second heaven, where the righteous spirit eventually is seen going and kicking her out at the 3.5-year mark, which is the great tribulation, the great wrath, which is the last 3.5 years. So the governing authority, for there is no authority except from God. It's who Mother appoints. And Mother always appointed these daughters of Zion to govern the body. And what does it say? It says, I will lay upon him the key of David. What does it say? It says the government will be upon his shoulder. The key of David is the daughters of Zion. They are what rules the body and always did. It's the restoration of the righteous foundation. That tried and tested stone. Well, she's gone through her trying and her testing. And now we see her taking back what was always hers, which is this body, her mantle. For there is no authority except from God, and those which exist are established by God. These daughters of Zion don't appoint themselves. God appoints them. And God knew them before the foundations of the world. Now, 2, therefore whoever resists authority has opposed the ordinance of God, and they who have opposed will receive condemnation upon themselves. So we're talking about when the 3.5-year, the judgment of the house of God begins. All right? And you're going to be without excuse not to understand who they are, because they are going to be empowered in some way. All right? For rulers, but if you're of God, if you are of Christ and of the righteous spirit represented by these daughters of Zion, Christ says there is one yet greater to come. He represented the tabernacle. He represented the body. He's talking about the spirit. All right? And he says, you can blaspheme me, but you're not going to blaspheme my spirit and get away with it. She's the judge. That's what it says in Psalm 110. She's the judge that sits to his right hand. All right? And she indwells the Holy of Holies because she governs the body. That's what you're seeing. All right? And in this case, she must reshape, reform, remold the body through the words of truth. She rebirths it. All right? And this is that 3.5 years. The first 3.5 years. That's actually what these daughters are doing. They're giving life to the body. They're reshaping it. They're rebirthing it. They're recreating it. All right? For rulers are not a cause of fear for good behavior, but for evil. The evil is going to fear them. Do you want to have no fear of authority? Do what is good and you will have praise from the same. All right. So, for she, not he, they got he. For she is the servant. She's called the servant, the branch, in Zechariah 3. And the women to be wondered at there, not men, they're women to be wondered at, are representing the spirit that comes into existence, that manifests. And she says, out of this group, this 144,000, will come my servant, the branch. That's the daughter Zion, which is representative of Christ's one bride. We're not teaching polygamy of the new heaven. That's fallen Adam's theology. That's the whore spirit's theology. That's not Christ's theology. And that's not the daughter Zion's theology. And it certainly isn't Mother and Father God's theology. It never was. For she is the servant, the branch of God to thee for good. But if you do what is evil, be afraid. For she does not bear the sword for nothing. So we looked at our sword as our tongue, our words, and we know that Christ says there is great power in our words. So it appears that her sword is her word, wherein lies great power. All right? So our word has great power. These daughters of Zion that are appointed have great power. So it says she does not bear the sword for nothing, for she is the servant, the branch. That's what I'm going to call this. Of God. And watch this. An avenger. She's an avenger. She's a marvel. Oh, look at this. And some would say a revenger. You can put that there. Who brings wrath on him and her that practices evil. Well, who's that? That's fallen Adam and the whore spirit. All right? Who exalts the image of Baal. That's what that's really about. So verse 5. Therefore, it is necessary to be in subjection not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. Verse 6. For this cause pay you also tribute, for they are God's servants attending continually upon this very thing. So it's almost like you help them. You are to help them do their job. Render therefore to all their dues tribute to whom tribute is due, custom to whom custom, and fear to whom you fear, and honor to whom you are to honor. Now, I love this verse, these verses here. It says, love fulfills the law. Law doesn't fulfill it. Love fulfills it. What does it say? Owe nothing to anyone except to love one another. For you who loves your neighbor has fulfilled the law. Love. It doesn't say you have to do this and this and this and this. But you love. You care for one another. For this, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet. And if there is any other commandment, because these are the commandments of heaven and that's it. Wow. I thought we were less. It is summed up in this saying, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Now, when you get studying that word neighbor in a lot of context, it has the idea of your sister, which was what man fell for. He did not love his sister like he was supposed to, the one that he was in covenant with, and we discussed that. Malachi 2. He created laws against his sister, against his righteous sister, who he was in covenant with, who was his spirit. She's identified as his spirit of the youth of his covenant. And he turned on her. He dealt unfaithfully against her. And Christ come to restore her back, to show man where she goes. And what her role is, to show her what her role is. Mother used the only begotten Son to show her daughter that she was forgiven, because she would have to wander in a land not inhabited. That's the Gentiles, all right? But now at the end, she is seen reshaping them, recreating the body, rebirthing it is what she does. She brings it back to life. She gives life. What does it say? What if the rejecting of them be the reconciling of the world? If I forgot it that fast. If the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, that's how it goes. What shall the receiving of them be but life from the dead? So that's what she's appointed to do. Right? Love does no wrong to a neighbor or to a sister. And yet it did. Not this love. This wasn't love. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. All right. Clothe yourself with Christ, with our new body. He's our tabernacle. And the Spirit indwells that tabernacle. All right. Do this knowing the time that it is already the hour for you to awaken from sleep. For now, salvation, that's a feminine, is nearer to us than when we believed. I think that nearness there is alluding to just how close these daughters of Zion are to you. They're right here. They're in existence right now. They're just waiting for that sealing in Revelation 7 so they can begin the harvest, the deliverance of the body, and by the 3.5 year mark, we see that accomplished is what it looks like. Now that's what we're supposing. The night is far gone, the day is at hand. Oh, we're looking for the new day. So then let us cast off the works of darkness and put on the armor of light. Let us walk properly as in the daytime, not in orgies and drunkenness, not in sexual immorality and sensuality, not in quarreling and jealousy, because that's what this was chalked up to. Basically, the whore spirit, in essence, was jealous of the righteous spirit. And I've been supposing some things about that too. You see, the one that God had created to put in charge of this whole creation was the woman in the beginning, representing her daughter, her spirit. And but she was, I think she was created for great things. And Lucifer, being the commander of the host at that time, in a sense, to protect, she was like saw as the, I believe, the cherubim, perhaps, that protected the glory, which was the woman. But she saw that she was destined for greatness, and she became very jealous of that. And so she said, well, fine, I can take this. I can take this power from her. I'll just take him. He'll exalt me, right? Now, that's one way of looking at it. I realize it's not necessarily the right way, because I can punch holes in that myself. But it is looking like it's something to do to that effect. And promising man that he'd be exalted as a god on the earth, and she was doing everything he wanted. I mean, hey, why not? But they did. They had a great jealousy towards her sister. And she alludes to that fact in Song of Songs, where she says, you know, I've been forced to tend his vineyard, her vineyards, but my own I have neglected. And then we're shown that she is called back out into the wilderness by the Mother Spirit, Mother Jerusalem, and she's given back her vineyards. And this is a symbol. It's showing us an allegory. The daughters of Zion being given back their birthright, which is this body. This is their mantle, to birth it, to reshape it, to recreate it. That's what they do. And then when they rise up into the second heaven, it's all allegory. It also shows the recreation of the new heaven. That's what it's showing, because only the Spirit can do that. It's not groaning for the manifestation of the sons. The sons cannot do this. Only the daughters of Zion can do this, that were rejected in the very beginning. And so it says, why do I see every man standing around with his hands on his hips as a woman in travail? You see, they can't deliver the burden. They can't reshape it. They can't birth the children. Only the daughters appointed can do this. And they are being, it says they will be restored back to their rightful place. Verse 14, but put on the Lord. Put on Jesus Christ and make no plans to satisfy your fleshly desires. Now we showed that man represents the flesh, and that the woman represents the spirit, whether that be a righteous spirit or a whore spirit. But man absolutely represents the flesh, and it says the flesh adds nothing. Nothing. It's the spirit that does it all. It's the spirit that shapes the body. You are the image of God if you are shaped by the righteous spirit. If you're joined to a harlot, I'm sorry, but you're not the image of God. The spirit, the righteous spirit, is the image of God. And when she reshapes that body is the image of God. So Christ was God, manifested in the flesh, because he was shaped by the righteous spirit. All right. I think that's everything I wanted to look at today. Now, I know I got caught up in some things and probably got a little bit off track on a few things that I probably wanted to go into a little bit more detail. But I think that's everything for today. I don't think we need to add anything else on. I know when I watch, if I happen to go in and watch this video, I'll go, well, why didn't you say this here or that there? But if you've been watching my videos, you know that. But there you go. I mean, you know, in your own studies, if you're looking at the wraths, and like I said in Revelation 6, it's the wrath of God, but it seems to be the beginning of the judgment of God's people, the first 3.5 years. But the last 3.5 years, the devil is cast to the earth, right? So that's the devil's wrath. So there's a distinction to be made, because it's definitely there. That terminology is there, but it's a premise to work from, okay, is all I'm presenting to you. Because I'm studying it, I'm looking into it all the time that I'm able to, excuse me, and trying to hasten the day of the Lord on. And that word hasten there, like I said, has the idea of you only do that through study, which means that we better get something right in our theology. Because the Lord says, who will bring me into Edom? Who's going to bring me into Edom? Edom is Adam. So she's saying, who's going to bring me in? You know who's going to bring her in? Those daughters of Zion that raised their hands up in worship to her. They're going to bring her in for the judgment of the body, which is the rebirthing of the body. Anyway, I don't know how else I can say it. And I know for anybody who stumbles across my video, it's a wild, crazy, thing to look at. But if you go back through and you pull up some of the videos and you really try to understand it through the verses that's in there, you might come to a better understanding of what it is we've been trying to hit at here. So there you have it. There's my video. I hope you have a blessed day from the Lord, and I just hope you have an all-around good day.